Hello, class and professor. My name is Ari, and today we're going to be talking about in-flight emergencies. So you're probably thinking what an in-flight emergency is. It's already in its name. It's an emergency that occurs while in flight. For better terms, it's an abnormal situation that necessitates an immediate return to the ground because a pilot and passenger's life are in danger. Now, there are two types of in-flight emergencies. According to the FAA, there is a distress emergency and an urgency. Uh, Distress is when there is a life threatening issue at hand, such as fire, mechanical failure, or structural damage. Whereas in an urgency emergency, it's probably not immediately dangerous, but can be catastrophic, such as uncertainty in fuel, avionics not working, or just low visibility. Now that we've finished talking about in flight emergencies, now I'm going to talk about aircraft emergencies that are not prevalent in the air. And they happen more on the ground. This would happen during after taxi during run up area, which would be a good time to find that the aircraft is not fit for flight. This would be any abnormal situation that deems the aircraft not flight worthy and presents a danger to the pilot or its occupants. This can be any, like the given examples that I have on the screen is engine or electrical fire on the ground. We'll get more into what to do if that ever happens in the next few slides. I've been in flight training for the past month and a half, and a common staple that is said over and over again in the event of engine failure or aircraft failure or just emergency procedures is aviate, navigate, communicate, ANC. It is the top priority for any pilot in command. In order to aviate accordingly and properly, you're going to use your flight controls and instruments to direct aircraft's attitude, airspeed, and altitude. If the engine is no longer working and you're just flying a dead stick, you have to maximize your time aloft depending on your altitude. And in order to do that, you have to know your specific aircraft's VG, which is your best glide speed. In the event of any in flight emergency, your nerves will definitely be going. And once you have the aircraft stable and you realize what you need to do, secondly, you want to navigate, all while aviating at the same time. You should be looking around, pondering, wondering where you're going to put down the aircraft depending on the emergency at hand. It may be immediate or it may be uh, postponed because the aircraft is slightly working and may be able to get you to where you need to go. From there, you want to attempt to comply with the clearance that you're currently at, depending on the altitude that you're at as well. Still keep in mind, like I said, aviate the aircraft first. Once you have picked out the appropriate place to touch down and put the aircraft in a safe manner, now you can communicate your intentions and what you need to do and call for an emergency. Your nerves will be rattled from the get go, you'll be flustered, and before you aviate or navigate, you'll want to communicate your emergency. However, it is very important to first aviate, navigate, then communicate. Once the aircraft is under control, you've chosen an appropriate landing area that is reachable, talk with ATC, and declare your emergency as follows: the nature of your emergency, the condition of your flight, and your given intentions uh, so that they can send. I don't want to jump the gun too early on the last slide, but while you are communicating your intentions and when you highlight the kind of emergency that you have, while you are declaring emergency, you want to have the radios completely silent so that ATC and you can talk. And you declare the emergency just like this: Mayday, 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 depending on if your emergency is life threatening, or Pan, Pan, Pan if it's an urgent situation, but it is not an immediate life threatening situation. In addition, let's say you're having an engine failure or there's a fire, you want to squawk 77 00 on your transponder. As you see in front of you, I have two examples for any distress type of in-flight emergency. The first example I have is engine failure and or stoppage, only because it's a very common and hot topic. The first thing you want to do for any random engine failure and there was no sign for it to stop at all, first check if you have fuel. All right. If you have fuel, attempt a restart. For some reason, your engine quit. Right. Uh, you would attempt a restart by turning your fuel pump on, throttle in full, mixture rich, turn on your fuel pump or prime your fuel for about 8 to 15 seconds. Then lower your throttle 1/4 and try to attempt to restart. If the restart is unsuccessful, prepare to land. And you're going to do that by hitting your VG, which is your best glide speed, adjust your flaps accordingly, fuel pump off, fuel shutoff valve off, and your gen bat switch off just right before you touch down. In the event that it's not a 100% butter landing, you just eliminate the electric portion and you eliminate the fuel portion so that if anything goes wrong, you don't have a random fire start. Now, electrical fire while in flight, the best immediate action to fight that is your gen bat switch off and open the air vents and windows so that you can breathe and you don't get intoxicated by CO2. Only if altitude permits and the fire still remains because something else is burning since you already turned off the electricity, slightly pitch nose down to attempt to blow out the fire. Yeah, it's kind of like a candlestick. If you blow on it hard enough, the fire will go out. Now, if you're low on altitude, aviate the aircraft, get on the floor as soon as possible. Now in front of you, I have two urgent in-flight emergency examples, and they are fuel pressure loss and loss in weather or unknown terrain. This would be a scenario where you say pan, pan, pan. I personally had an issue where I had very high oil temp. And in order to combat that, I was doing a bunch of little couple circles. But back to the slides. Fuel pressure loss. Your first immediate action to correct that is turn your fuel pump on. A lot of these examples that I'm giving you, it relates to the Katana DA20, and the only immediate action that I have to do is turn the fuel pump on. There is a mechanical and electrical, and the electrical one is the one that I switch on inside the cockpit. If that does not fix the issue, just navigate to the nearest airport to land if the aircraft permits. Now, if you have fuel pressure loss, that means the aircraft is not going to get any fuel, and you'll have to find the best place to land below you, depending on your altitude, hit that best glide speed, and pick a good appropriate spot. Another instance is when weather comes at you and you're traveling cross country and you're in unknown terrain, or maybe you're traveling at night. You have to fly the aircraft and rely on onboard instruments. And it's easy to get spatially disoriented, especially when it's so dark and there's no lights around. So the best immediate action to do is contact ATC to get direction out of the weather, or just direction as to the nearest airport. I felt it was critically important to add another urgent in-flight emergency, and that is inoperative radios, because it is a common scenario. Luckily, I've never had that happen, but I have prepared for it in the future if it ever is to come about. A malfunction radio may be deemed emergency as is a safety risk with surrounding traffic because you don't know where everybody's at and you can't uh, let Tower or ATC know what your intentions are if you plan to come back or if you're in the middle of a cross country. You need to be talking to so many different people. Um, but even though it's not time essential, it's still an in-flight emergency. So it's best to establish communication with ATC to declare intentions so that other aircraft can avoid your path of travel, because you don't want an inadvertent crash in midair. Even though you're looking, there are some blind spots, so it's best to either give your tower a call if you have their phone number, or if your electronics still work except your radio, change your transponder and squawk 7600. We finally made it. We have to recap everything that we've talked about, or that I have discussed with you, and that is the two types of in-flight emergencies, and they are distress, which is life-threatening, to include fire or engine failure, and urgent, which is not immediately dangerous but can be catastrophic. For example, unknown location because you're traveling cross country and you're not familiar with the area, or your fuel gauge doesn't work. We also went over aviate, navigate, communicate. In the event of any in-flight emergency, your main priority as pilot in command is to aviate. Then, after you have the aircraft situated, you want to navigate where you're going to be landing at, or what aircraft, or not aircraft, but which airport you're going to be landing at, if you can make it. And then finally, communicate your intentions or what you need to do to ATC. Squawk codes appropriately. 7700 is for any in-flight emergency, uh, and 7600 is for emergency that includes radio failure. I didn't put on there 7500, because yes, that is an in-flight emergency, but also that's aircraft hijacking. And since we're in personal 1 or 2-seater planes, that's probably not prevalent. So I kind of omitted that out from this discussion. And the immediate actions to varying emergency examples that I had already given you guys, which is electrical fire, engine quit, fuel pressure loss, or loss in weather. Thank you so much for watching this video.